Japan, 1561. Two armies stand across from each other on the floodplains of Kawanakajima. Combined, they number over 40,000 men. The ground still remembers the blood of their last 3 meetings here. The fog hasn't lifted. It never does at Kawanakajima. And at the center of it all, 2 men who have spent a decade trying to defeat each other. 2 men who, if either of them is being honest, don't entirely want to. This is not a story about hatred. It's a story about something far more dangerous. To understand Takeda Shingen and Uesugi Kenshin, you first have to understand the world that made them. The Sengoku period, the Warring States era, was Japan at its most brutal and most alive. For over a century, the country had no real central authority. Every province was a kingdom, every lord was a warlord, and survival meant expansion or extinction. In this world, compassion was a luxury most couldn't afford. Most. Uesugi Kenshin ruled Echigo province, facing the Sea of Japan, cold, proud, forged by harsh winters. He was called the Dragon of Echigo. He was a military genius who reportedly never lost a battle he personally commanded. He was also deeply religious, a devoted follower of the Buddhist war god Bishamonten, a deity he believed had chosen him as an instrument on earth. Kenshin never married. He took no concubines. He spent days fasting and meditating before battle. His men believed he was something closer to a god than a general. And yet, he drank. A lot, actually. Sake, alone, on his veranda, with pickled plums, while his men slept. Not a social drinker, a solitary one. A man who carried his contradictions quietly. The same discipline that kept him celibate and fasting before war couldn't, or wouldn't, touch that one habit. In the end, most historians believe it killed him. These 2 men should have had nothing to talk about. Instead, they fought each other 5 times across more than a decade, always at the same river valley, Kawanakajima. And when it was over, Japan was still standing. Both of them were still standing. Why? Their rivalry didn't begin with war. It began with a request. Lesser lords in the Shinano province were being absorbed, or crushed, by Shingen's expansion. They had nowhere to turn, so they turned to Kenshin. They begged him to protect them. Kenshin could have ignored them. Shinano wasn't his province. It wasn't his problem. But Kenshin had a concept of himself that made ignoring them impossible. He didn't see war as conquest. He saw it, genuinely, as justice. To him, a powerful man who refused to protect the weak wasn't powerful. He was just large. So he marched. And Shingen, watching this man come down from the north to interfere in his business, felt something he probably hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. Not immediately, not consciously, but their first engagement at Kawanakajima in 1553 ended without a decisive result. And Shingen, a man who had crushed most of his enemies quickly, found himself thinking about Kenshin afterward, studying him, anticipating him. There's a word for that kind of attention. It isn't hatred. They would return to Kawanakajima 4 more times. 1555, 1557, 1561, 1564. 5 meetings, no winner. Here's the question that historians have wrestled with for centuries. These were 2 of the greatest military minds in Japanese history. Shingen had the resources, the cavalry, the political network. Kenshin had the tactical brilliance, the fanatical loyalty of his men, the terrain. Either of them, on their best day, had the capacity to destroy the other. So why didn't they? The easy answer is logistics. Kawanakajima was far from both of their home provinces. Extended campaigns stretched supply lines. Each man had other enemies, other fronts, other threats that couldn't be ignored. A total war against each other might leave both of them fatally exposed. That's the rational answer. It's probably partially true, but it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why Shingen, when his enemies in the south cut off his access to salt, a critical resource without which his armies couldn't survive, received a shipment of salt from Kenshin. His rival, his enemy, the man he had been fighting for years. Kenshin's message was brief. He reportedly said he did not wage war with salt. He waged war with swords. Think about what that means. Kenshin had a chance to win without fighting, to starve his greatest enemy into submission while keeping his own hands clean. It would have been brilliant strategy. It would have been easy. He refused. Because winning that way wasn't winning, not to him. It would have been a defeat of a different kind, a defeat of everything he believed about himself. And here's where the psychology becomes fascinating. Shingen understood this about Kenshin, and Kenshin understood it about Shingen. They weren't just fighting each other on the battlefield, they were mirrors for each other. Each man in the other saw a version of himself, the values he claimed to hold, held honestly. It's one thing to say you are honorable when everyone around you is weaker. It's another to face a man who is equally powerful, equally dangerous, and actually lives by the code you claim to share. Kenshin was proof that Shingen's ideals were real, that they could exist in this brutal world without destroying the man who held them. Shingen was proof of the same for Kenshin. To destroy that mirror was to lose something that no sword could replace. The Fourth Battle of Kawanakajima, 1561, is the most famous, the bloodiest. And it contains one of the most legendary moments in all of samurai history. According to the account, and historians debate how much is legend, Kenshin's forces caught Shingen's camp partially off guard in the early morning fog. In the chaos, a lone horseman broke through to Shingen's command position and slashed at him with a sword. Shingen deflected the blows with his war fan. The horseman, it is said, was Kenshin himself. The Dragon of Echigo, unwilling to wait for battle to reach him, had personally ridden into the heart of the enemy's command and attacked its general. Shingen's bodyguards drove him off before a killing blow could land. Now, did this actually happen? Probably not exactly as described. The story accumulated drama over centuries, as these things do. But here's what's interesting. Both sides told this story. It was passed down in both the Uesugi tradition and the Takeda tradition. Neither side was embarrassed by it. Neither side tried to erase it. Because in both accounts, each man comes out looking worthy. Kenshin, audacious, fearless, willing to fight the war himself rather than just command it. Shingen, calm under an assassination attempt, sharp enough to survive, composed enough to become legend. Even the stories they told about each other were compliments. In 1573, Takeda Shingen died. The cause is debated. Illness or a sniper's bullet during a campaign, depending on the source. He was 53 years old. He was, at the time of his death, arguably the greatest single threat to Oda Nobunaga's drive to unify Japan. Many historians believe that if Shingen had lived another 5 years, the history of Japan would be unrecognizable. When word reached Uesugi Kenshin, he wept. Not with relief, not with triumph, he wept, and reportedly said, "I have lost my greatest rival. There is no longer any man worthy of the name." 4 years later, in 1577, Kenshin died as well, also from illness, in the middle of planning what would have been his most ambitious campaign. He was 49. With both men gone, the power vacuum they had maintained between them collapsed. Oda Nobunaga moved quickly. Japan was unified, but under a different vision, in a different shape than it might have been. Two of the most extraordinary human beings of the Sengoku period had spent a decade in productive, magnificent, catastrophically inconclusive conflict with each other. And Japan, in some ways, never saw their like again. We talk about rivalry as though it's always about destruction, about one person rising as another falls, about zero-sum games and final victories. Shingen and Kenshin offer a different model. They understood, perhaps instinctively, perhaps philosophically, that the right kind of enemy is one of the rarest gifts a person can receive. An enemy who forces you to be better, who meets every move with a counter, who holds you accountable, not through friendship or loyalty, but through opposition. Kenshin sent salt because destroying Shingen through starvation would have ended the only relationship in his life that truly tested him. Shingen kept returning to Kawanakajima, not because he had to, but because on that floodplain, across from the Dragon of Echigo, he became the most fully realized version of himself. There is a kind of love in that. Strange, violent, futile, but love nonetheless. The Tiger of Kai and the Dragon of Echigo. 5 battles, no winner. And somehow, for both of them, that was the point.
That's the end of this video. Would you like to see more of it? I hope so. Let me know in the comments.